Hey guys, so I figured we go back a bit and talk about the Void Linux. It's been a while since I last posted a video, so I figured we could talk about something. And since I was doing kind of some administrative work in my machine, that is to say, I've been removing some packages and changing some repositories. I figured I'd go into the more advanced features of XBPS if any of you are interested. So I'm supposing that you already know how to install packages and how to kind of query for packages and stuff. In case you don't now, this is going to be a very brief overview. So you can install packages on Void Linux by using the xbps-install kind of command, and then you give it the S flag in order to synchronize with a remote repository, and then you give it the name of a package, for example, OpenSSH. And you can update your packages by using the su command. So you always have to sudo all of these, obviously. But the su is going to automatically update all of your packages as usual. It's going to be equivalent of an apt-get update. You can also query for packages. So if you want to look for a specific package in the remote repositories, you're going to use the xbps query with the repository mode on, with the search flag option. This is what kind of those flags mean. And then you can search for example, vim, I don't know, whatever. You can also remove packages by using the xbps remove and then uppercase R. So if you want to make a recursive removal of all the dependencies that come with the package, and then you just remove whichever package you want. Now this is the basic again, just as a reminder. Now if you want to go in more detail with that, so the first interesting thing that I'll say is that XBPS actually has kind of a configuration file, not only for kind of the general configuration, but also for the different repositories. So the system configuration file, you can usually find it at user share, and then you have a .xbps.d kind of folder. And you usually have kind of one configuration file for each of your repositories. In this case, I'm only using the main one right now. And you also have kind of a general configuration file. We'll get to the general one later. As of right now, I haven't read too much into it, but there are 2 or 3 commands that are nice to look at once we get into the XBPS config. Now, if you want to, for example, change your repositories, I'll just open up a Firefox window very quickly. This is a virtual machine with 1 gig of RAM, so it can take a few seconds. But once we're there, I'll go to the Void Linux handbook, and this is a very nice source if you want to learn about Void Linux. And what it has is it has kind of a little list of it also has most of the commands that I'm going to show you later. But what I want to show is the mirrors essentially. And for each repository of Void, you have several different mirrors. So if you want, for example, if you live in the US, if you live in whichever country you live in, you can usually change your mirrors in order to improve kind of the connectivity. So as an example, I'm right now, if I open up this kind of configuration file for my repository, I am using the German, so the German kind of, it's not even in Germany. Okay, it's in the EU, but it's in Finland. So I'm using the kind of the one in Finland, the mirror that's in Finland. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sudo edit that, and I'm going to change this kind of mirror to be, for example, the one on New York. So I'm going to take this one as an example. So it's mirror.clarkson.edu, and then you usually give it kind of the Void Linux name. And if I can even open this mirror and show you what it has there. So it has some files, and you usually want to go to the current, and then it's going to show too many files. But what this current folder has, it kind of contains one folder for each of the sub repositories. So as an example, if I want to use the main repository, I just need to write this current keyword. But if I wanted to use the non-free repository, I would also have to add the non-free keyword right after that, for example. So that's it. If I save this, once I have saved and changed kind of my mirror, I can then use the another XBPS. So I can use an xbps-install S without any package in order to just synchronize my repository. And notice that I'm now using a different mirror. So once your mirrors are all set up and you can choose Just as a reminder, you can choose kind of those tier 1 mirrors, which are essentially kind of the master ones, and they are the ones that are controlled essentially by the developers. And then you also have a choice of tier 2 mirrors. So these essentially are going to synchronize from the main ones from time to time. So you're not guaranteed to have the most up-to-date software, but if it's better in terms of bandwidth with regards to what you have up here, you can always use these. And this is the thing about mirrors. So another useful thing is that if we look at the configuration file for XBPS, I'm going to open it. So you can declare kind of additional repositories here if you want. This is one thing. Notice that you can use kind of this little syntax repository equals, and then you can set either local repositories, which are given by using kind of a path name. So if you're using XBPS source, for example, to generate kind of packages on the fly, and XBPS source is something that we'll cover later, or you can also have, let's say, a custom repository that you set up somewhere. You can also use this with a custom kind of URL. Another useful little thing is that you can also kind of ignore packages. And as an example of where this is useful, if you installed Void, you most likely know that there is this kind of, in this case, I'm opening up VI, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit my bash RC because I have an alias, in fact. And if I remove this alias and if I log in again, if I press VI, I actually get the VI editor. So not the Vim, not the improved version of VI, but I get the VI itself. And I really hate this program because I want to use Vim kind of commands, but sometimes I just can't. And really, I just want to remove it. But what happens is that if I try to issue an XBPS remove command for NVI, which is the name of kind of this little editor, what happens is that I get kind of a transaction aborted due to unresolved dependency. So in fact, the VI editor is kind of a dependency for the base system itself. But we can get around that. Since we know that this is not really necessary because we have other kind of editors of choice, we can tell XBPS to ignore this package when we try to resolve dependencies. And you do so by using the ignore package statement. So I just need to remove kind of this comment up here. And then you give it the name of the package. So in this case, the package is called NVI. And just to show you what it looks like, so XBPS query NVI, this is it's somewhere there, XBPS query, it's this one here that I just lost, the Berkeley VI editor. So if I give it this name, the name that appears on the repository, now what happens is that if I try to remove it again, now I get the opportunity to do so because it's ignoring the fact that it's a dependency again. And then I can get rid of it and never think about this old editor again. So that's something nice. Some useful little kind of features that XBPS also has. So I already explained this earlier, but XBPS is essentially not a single binary, but rather it is kind of a suite of binaries. So if I try to do an XBPS command and then I press tab for completion, you notice that I get several different commands, and you can look at some of them as you wish. So as an example, if you look at xbps fetch xbps, this command itself, it's essentially kind of a glorified version of wget. So really, I can use it, for example, to download a web page. So if I try to type in whichever URL, so for example, www.google.com, what's going to happen is that it's going to download this little web page. And this is what XBPS uses, again, when it downloads your packages. So you may notice that this prompt looks very similar to the one you see when you install a new package or when you update it, because it's the function that it calls. And notice that I can get this kind of google.com. So this is essentially kind of, again, the JavaScript and the HTML that make up the Google web page. But I won't get into all of them because honestly, I don't know all of them. But you also have useful little things like the digest one. It does kind of hash functions, and it applies a hash to kind of verify signatures essentially. And most of them, they have a role that is played whenever you are updating. So XBPS is a very modular kind of system, and the main xbps-install is going to call several of these kind of little functions or that are contained in the different commands. Now, one interesting thing that you can do is you can use, for example, the r index or the repository index kind of command. So if I look at this, the manual, it kind of manages local package repositories. And in fact, you don't necessarily need to use kind of XBPS source in order to manage local repositories. Because one interesting thing is that if you go to your var cache XBPS, you actually have a little cache of all the little packages that you installed in the past. So if I do an ls here, I get a list of all the packages that I installed. So I have the .xbps package and also the signature. And this essentially means that if I want, I can downgrade my packages to whichever version I already had installed previously. So let's say that I want to, for example, downgrade OpenSSH. So if I grep for OpenSSH on this list, you notice that I have two versions. I have the current version, which is 8.3, and I have another version. So as of right now, if I do an SSH version, I'm using the newer one. If I want to downgrade, what I can do is I can add the older version, this one XBPS package, to my repository index, and I do so by using the xbps-rindex. So if you have any questions, again, you use the -a option in order to add a package, a .xbps package, to your package repository. So as an example, I'm going to do this right now. So I'll sudo xbps-rindex, I'll add, and then the package that's at var cache xbps, and I'll add this older version, so OpenSSH 8.2p, and this is the package that I want. So now that this is, I actually already registered it, but if you wanted, you could do, you would get a different little prompt. Now, once that is registered, you can then simply use an xbps-install command to install it as if it were a regular package. But instead of using the -s flag, which is going to synchronize remotely, you're going to use the -r, and you're going to specify a specific repository, in fact. So I'm going to do this, and the -r stands for repository, and then I can give it whichever repository. So it could even be a URL, or it could be a local path if I want to search for a package locally. In this case, my package is located locally, so I'm going to var cache xbps. And then what I can do is I can force it to kind of install the package. If it is since OpenSSH is already installed, I'm going to force a downgrade. I'm going to force a downgrade into OpenSSH, and then the version 8.2p. I think it's 8.2. I do need to sudo that 8.2p1 dash. There you go. And then you notice that the action is now set to downgrade. So if, for example, OpenSSH 8.3 had introduced a problem, I could always downgrade as long as I already had that installed. And now I'm going to do that. If I execute SSH version once again, you notice that I downgraded the package successfully. And if I want to keep the package this way, so if I don't want it to update in the future, I could put this package on hold. And the way in which you do that is you use the XBPS Package DB. So looking at the manual, I can use the -m option to specify a mode, and one of the possible modes is set to hold. So in fact, I'm going to set this package on hold in such a way that it won't be updated in the future. Just as an example, if I try to do an xbps-install -su to update, I'm not going to give it the Y option, but notice that it wants to upgrade OpenSSH because I have an older version. But if I use the XBPS package DB -m and then set it to hold OpenSSH, what's going to happen is that if I try to update again, it's not going to say anything because it's not going to take the OpenSSH package into account. It's set to hold. So these are some of the kind of useful little features that I found for XBPS. If you have any questions again regarding XBPS itself or whatever about Void Linux, you can always drop a comment and stuff. So thank you very much for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.